Abel Teller had always known the club was in his blood. From the time he could walk, the roar of Harley engines had been his lullaby. The sight of leather coots as common as the denim jackets worn by his peers. Yet no one ever talked about his father, at least not in front of him. He'd overheard whispers over the years, murmurs of sacrifice and choices. But every time he asked Wendy or Nero about Jax Teller, they'd brush him off. Now 23, Abel lived in a modest apartment above the garage where he worked, just outside of Charming. It wasn't the Teller Morrow lot. That had been sold off years ago. But it still felt close to home. He couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was missing, a hole in his life where answers about his father should be. One evening, while cleaning up the garage, Abel stumbled across an old wooden box tucked in the corner of a dusty shelf. The carved crow on the lid caught his eye. He opened it and found stacks of photographs, letters, and patches emblazoned with SAMCRO. Among them was a faded photograph of his father, Jax Teller, standing next to a group of men who looked just as dangerous as they did loyal. The box also contained a letter addressed to Abel. "Son, if you're reading this, it means you're old enough to understand. The life I lived wasn't perfect. It was bloody, complicated, and filled with mistakes. But everything I did to protect you and your brother. I made sure this life wouldn't swallow you like it did me. I hope you'll choose a different path. If you ever feel the pull of the club, remember, it's a heavy crown to wear. Love, Dad." Abel read the letter over and over. His father's words haunted him. He wanted to know more, needed to know more. And he couldn't shake the idea that joining the Sons of Anarchy was his birthright, no matter what Jax had written. Abel approached Chibbs, who had remained SAMCRO's president all these years. The old Scot had aged gracefully but still carried the same intensity in his gaze. When Abel walked into the clubhouse unannounced, heads turned. "Chibbs," Abel said, trying to steady his voice. "I want a prospect for the club." Chibbs sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. He looked at the young man who was the spitting image of Jax in his prime, but with Wendy's softness in his eyes. "You don't know what you're asking, lad," Chibbs said, gesturing for him to sit. "I do," Abel insisted. "It's in my blood. My dad, you'd have wanted better for ye." Chibbs cut him off. "He bled to keep ye and Thomas out of this life, and we're gonna honor that." "I can handle it," Abel argued. Chibbs leaned forward, his voice dropping to a growl. "It's not about whether ye can handle it. It's about whether we let ye, and the answer's no." The room was silent as Abel stormed out, his jaw clenched and fists balled. Over the next few weeks, Abel threw himself into learning more about his father's past. He tracked down old allies and enemies of SAMCRO, piecing together the story of Jax Teller, the man who'd sacrificed everything for the club and his family. He learned about Tara, the love Jax had fought so hard to protect, only to lose her to betrayal. He uncovered the truth about the conflict with the Mayans, the Irish, and how Jax had walked a line between loyalty and survival until the bitter end. But the deeper Abel dug, the more he realized his father's warning wasn't just about the danger. It was about the cost, what the club demanded of a man's soul. Determined to prove himself, Abel decided to help the club in his own way. He started small, fixing up their bikes for free and hanging around the periphery of their operations. He kept his ears open, quietly stepping in when the Sons needed something they couldn't handle themselves. Finding a part, smoothing over disputes with local garages, or even delivering a message to a rival club. The Sons noticed. "That kid's got grit," Tig said one night. Chibbs, however, remained firm. "He's not joining. Jax wouldn't want it." One night, while Abel was closing up the garage, two men stormed in. They were from a small-time rival gang trying to make a name for themselves. They cornered Abel, demanding information about SAMCRO's movements. When Abel refused, they beat him within an inch of his life. Bloodied and bruised, Abel managed to grab a wrench and fight back, knocking one out cold and chasing the other off. The next morning, Chibbs and the club found him at the hospital. "You didn't call us?" Chibbs asked, his voice tinged with anger and concern. "I didn't need to," Abel croaked. Chibbs looked at him long and hard. "You're stubborn like your da," he muttered. Chibbs called a vote among the club members. Despite their reservations, they all agreed Abel had earned a chance to prospect. When Chibbs handed Abel the kuta, however, it wasn't SAMCRO's. It bore the patch of Redwood Originals, a new charter created for members who wanted to honor the Sons' legacy without carrying the weight of Charming's bloody history. "You'll always be part of the family, Abel," Chibbs said. "But you're starting fresh. Build something your da would be proud of." Abel stared at the coot, his chest swelling with pride. But as he reached out to take it, a phone buzzed in Chibbs' pocket. He pulled it out, his face darkening as he read the message. "Trouble?" Abel asked. Chibbs nodded, his expression grim. "Looks like the Mayans are pushing into Charming again, and they're bringing old friends with them." Abel slipped on the coot without hesitation. Then let's ride. As the club roared out of the lot, Abel couldn't shake the feeling that his journey into the club's world had only just begun, and that the road ahead was darker and more dangerous than he ever imagined. In the distance, a shadowed figure watched them leave, a cigarette glowing faintly in the night.